This was the scene in Toronto. The streets filled with protesters by the thousands, and things stayed relatively peaceful. There was no police intervention, but there were thousands of people, as I say, downtown to march in solidarity and to denounce police violence. My next guest was in that crowd, as a matter of fact. You know him well and his positions. He's such an eloquent voice on these issues, an activist, the author of The Skin We're In, A Year of Black Resistance and Power. There you see over his shoulder that very book. He's Desmond Cole from Toronto. Mr. Cole, thanks so much for being a guest on our program this morning.
Good morning.
I want to ask about your reaction, number one, your thoughts, as you watch what's been happening in Minneapolis and the protests there as they've spread to literally some 75 U.S. cities and to Canadian cities as well, and then being part of that demonstration in Toronto on Saturday. What have you been thinking on?
I'm having a mixture of emotions because I am, as always, so proud of Black people in the United States under the circumstances that they're in, finding ways to fight back, finding ways to be heard all over the world, even though they are being so victimized and targeted by their police and their government in general. They're still finding ways, even during a global pandemic, to fight back. And I find that encouraging. But at the same time, I see how we in this country are so fascinated and fixated on the United States to the exclusion of our own country's issues with white supremacy and anti-Black racism. So I find myself wondering if we would have had all this coverage even about Toronto, or even the presence that people knew about Regis Horchinsky-Paquette, if not for Minneapolis. And we can't wait for the Americans in order to be able to talk about ourselves.
Just for people to understand, we have been covering that. Regis Horchinsky-Paquette fell to her death from very high 24th, I believe, balcony window, and fell to her death with police in her apartment. And there is an investigation now into that, and we certainly have seen people rally around that particular story at this time. It seems so timely. You raise exactly the point I was going to ask. I mean, here in Canada, we tend to say, oh, that deadly racism, that's an American situation. So what should Canadians be taking from this?
I actually think we have to stop pivoting from America and then saying, what about Canada, literally placing us as an afterthought. And we have to look into our own communities. Police kill Black people in Toronto at 20 times the rate that they do white people. The Indigenous population in Canada is a fraction of the entire population, yet Indigenous people make up 30% of the federal prison population. This is a country stolen by white settlers from Indigenous peoples who were here for millennia. Who are we kidding when we contrast ourselves to the United States? We don't even need the United States to have conversations here. And it's like every time, starting from the beginning, every time, is it racist? Is it racist? Is it racist? The media is also complicit in contributing to this by acting very naive and brand new every time something happens, rather than saying, what about the patterns and histories of systemic violence among Canadian police, among Canadian child welfare systems, among Canadian schools and workplaces? We have to start further along the line instead of pretending like it's new every time.
When you mention Canadian police forces, we've certainly watched them make overtures anyway to engagement with the Black community. Have those been sincere? Have they been effective at all in your view?
No, they're words. Mark Saunders, the chief of police of Toronto, who makes hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, every time there is a police investigation, Mark Saunders says, well, our police are under investigation. I'm sorry, I can't comment. But in this most recent case of Regis Horchinsky-Paquette, Mark Saunders has been saying a lot of things in the media about his side of what happened, while still asking the rest of us to be patient. What that shows me is that every single time Mark Saunders says our police are under investigation and we can't comment, that he's lying. But he's still supposedly the authority on these issues. A Black police chief can't save us from police violence. A mayor who brags about anti-racism while having cops on our transit system, cops in TCHC, Mayor Tory, wanting to talk about he doesn't support anti-Black racism, and yet the city's ramping up its policing against our communities under Mayor Tory's watch. All these politicians and leaders of these institutions are giving us words while trying to maintain the right to use violence against us. We need to disarm and defund police and give the money that we're spending on them, billions of dollars, to the actual communities that we always say there isn't enough money for services, there isn't enough money for childcare and food programs. You know why? Because it's all with the police. And until we challenge their authority, we're not going to change anything.
Can I just ask, obviously we need to have a much longer conversation. I'm sorry, because I'm getting you a little bit late in the hour, and we're coming to the top of the hour, and I'll have to say goodbye on this. But when you're the second guest of mine this hour to talk about defunding police as a solution to bring about change, what does that mean? What does that look like? Very quickly, Mr. Cole, if you would.
Not to be glib, but defunding the police means defunding the police. Somebody who's trained in de-escalation, who doesn't cost $120,000 a year, could have gone to Regis Korchinski-Paquette's apartment building and tried to make a better outcome than what happened. And this is the case every day. The white settler state says that policing has to be at the barrel of a gun and that the police have to have a license to kill. If you give someone a license to kill, it's because you want them to use it sometimes. There is no ending the violence until we take away the license to kill and the weapons that the police use to do it. And if that makes people afraid, just ask yourself, why are you more afraid of police not being able to hurt us than you are about police killing us? Because that's what's at stake here. Those are the choices. There are no other choices, and the violence continues as we see. The police can't be trained out of their ways because they live in a white supremacist society that teaches them that oppressing us is okay. They're not going to be trained out of their violence. The sticks and the guns and the tasers need to be taken away, and that money needs to be transformed into supports for our communities instead.
Desmond Cole, thank you for the time, the view, the very important perspective to hear. And as I said, please come back and we'll carry on this conversation. Obviously, it's something that we're going to be watching very closely now. Thank you so much. Desmond Cole, activist, author of The Skin We're In, A Year of Black Resistance and Power.